welcome from me too. I'm glad there's so many people are here today. As Paul already said, we're going to talk about smart glasses and head-worn devices today. I brought a great team of experts with a wide area of knowledge, and they're going to share some insights, aha moments, limits, and lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about the future of the technology. So why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure. My name's Kelly Thresher. I'm with the Postal Service Office of Inspector General. I work for a research team that looks at ways that the Postal Service can meet the demands of a changing digital world. And we've been doing a lot of research in augmented reality, a little bit into VR, and we've looked at drones, driverless vehicles, a whole plethora of things. So excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Alan Robles. I'm a firm-wide creative media leader for the architecture firm and design firm Gensler. We're looking at the way that these tools are not only impacting the way that we design things, the way that we develop things, but the way that these tools will impact the places that we design as they mature.
Hi, it's great to be here. My name is Jaap de Vries. I'm the Vice President of Innovation, Science and Technology for FM Global. For those of you who don't know, FM Global is a large commercial property risk insurer. We insure about 1 out of every 3 in the Fortune 1000, and great to be here.
Hi, Brock McKeel. I work on the Walmart piece of the business. Some of you may have heard of it. I work on central operations. So I work on the side of the business where we support the stores. So whether that is through new technology or new tools and enabling those associates to do their job in a better way in those 4 walls within the store. Own customer experience, and so we'll tell you a little bit about how I help bring that to life and some of the new technology.
And hello, my name is Mitch Mook. I work for GE, specifically GE Transportation. So we design, manufacture, and service locomotives and off-highway vehicles, and we have a digital suite to support all those assets. My role is I'm a process leader at a fulfillment facility that supports our global service operations just west of Chicago.
All right, thank you. So you see, we have a lot of great experts, various industries, so I'm very excited to ask you guys some questions. So before we go into the use cases, Kelly, I know you're a research expert, wrote some papers on the technology. So what do you think are the main fields and benefits of AR and VR?
Sure. So we started out talking to the Postal Service about augmented and virtual reality, looking at an advertising way of doing things. They took that and they ran with it. So they understood the premise, which was really important to us before we got into supply chain and how the Postal Service could use augmented reality and virtual reality in its processes. The ways that we've looked at these in the field, augmented reality has so many applications, and it's really just deciding the right ones for the Postal Service. Something that we've been looking at a lot is vehicle maintenance. The Postal Service has an aging fleet. Those little box trucks that you see around have been on the ground for about 20 years. They're being slowly replaced by vans and different types of vehicles, but fixing those is a huge cost for the Postal Service, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of overtime bringing that down, as well as training. Training has virtual reality and augmented reality components that could be used. The Postal Service hires about 600,000 employees. Many of those are part-time employees, more and more are part-time employees. Taking away some of that training time is critical to continuing to exist in this marketplace.
Great, thank you. So talking about the training time, Brock, I know you have a little stuff going on with virtual reality. Why don't you tell us about your training facilities?
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we were kind of challenged with what is virtual reality, how does AR play, does it play within the Walmart landscape? You know, we looked at a lot of different use cases and a lot of different companies, and some were good, some were bad. But then we landed at kind of saying, okay, if there's not a solid use case today in a retail world, where else is it being used? And out of Northwest Arkansas, there was a football team who was actually leveraging virtual reality on a pretty consistent basis. So went down, took a look at them, and they were leveraging Striver Labs. Striver Labs at the time was only focused on sports. So took that lens, brought them in, and the big piece was around the training piece. You could get multiple reps over and over. We have academy formats, and our academy formats are a little bit different than your typical training. It's a training location attached to a store. So you say, well, why do you need VR if you're attached to a store? There's probably 2 or 3 different scenarios that you can't create in a store or we don't want to create in a store. And so imagine if I have the goggles on, everyone in the room can see exactly what I see. We create customer experience problems. We create events that only happen one time a year, as you think of Black Friday, and allow new associates, store managers from a plethora of backgrounds to be able to say, here's what it's going to feel like. Here's what it's going to be. And it's really interesting to see the engagement because we knew the person in the headset would be engaged. The level of engagement from the entire classroom even elevated. Because in those classrooms, you have somebody from 3 days experience to 33 years in a store. And to see them working together to problem solve, to talk about how do you elevate leadership was really impactful. We now have it in over 170 locations in our academies, and we'll have 200 of those locations open by the end of the year. So,
great. So you see a lot of benefits right there in using the technology. From my point, we use augmented reality in warehouses, and we also have a great source of benefits regarding engagement and also training time. So Mitch, I know you use VR as well for designing the perfect plan, but you also told me that you are starting to use AR. Mm-hmm. So what do you think are additional benefits of using AR, and what are you using it for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have most of my training through GE, and they drill into you a lot of the Lean Six Sigma principles. So we like to look at it in terms of what's your value stream, right? And training doesn't necessarily mean you have a brand new person that needs to learn a brand new process. I've got 23,000 locomotive SKUs in my fulfillment center that might potentially ship all over the world for very specific work scopes. And so with that, we design and build what are called kits. So it's kind of like a box of Legos, but it's not Legos. It's locomotive parts times multiple trailers with the material. And what's becoming more and more of a demand, because you're always working, what's the voice of the customer, what do they need? It's becoming more and more apparent that the presentation of these kits and how they align to manufacturing or service processes is critical to their success or even their customers' success. So from a training perspective, we're always in the state of, I have a new kit that I need to design. How do I train my warehousing team to be able to develop that and actually have a dialogue with people halfway across the world? So we actually do that with virtual reality. We draw on models from our PLM system. We use Team Center, so lightweight JTs, and then we actually have a dialogue virtually with a headset with TAs across the globe, and we effectively create this kit package that is going to be used from a standard work perspective, from a training perspective for all of our operators out in the shop. And from an AR piece of it, AR is more of the how do you actually execute that plan. I thought Peggy had a great point with, how do you reinforce your standard work, and if it's as simple as a checklist and that first item is what needs to go into a box of parts, but it saves the service team hours upon hours of labor because they had to apply this to a locomotive in Western Australia. There's a huge value proposition right there from a training perspective.
Great, thank you. So, next question for you. I know you're kind of like from another standpoint because you're the insurance company,
yes.
FM Global,
yep.
Who is trying to protect all of the stuff we just talked about, the great plans, training facilities, stores. Of course, the Postal Service has a couple of warehouses as well. So what are your experiences with AR and VR?
So our value proposition as an insurance company is that we protect the value that our clients create, right? And we are a mutual company, so our clients are also our owners. But we do that through our engineering expertise. We've been around for about 200 years, and also through our in-house research. We have a huge research campus where we do very large-scale fire testing, We do flood modeling and wind uplift tests. And we operate globally. We follow our clients around. So if they are in hard-to-reach places or places where we don't have field engineers, we have about 1,600 field engineers around the world. And there's places in the world where it's very hard to get them there. There might be political restrictions to get them in those countries. One thing that we wanted to do is have that remote engineering, and so we send a set of glasses over to a client, and then we can actually walk them through and almost have them survey their own facility. We have our remote expert then in the home office, basically giving guidance, taking snapshots, and have our engineering standards. We have our own engineering standards there. Another thing that we wanted to do is, a lot of it is for us, since we have that engineering expertise, we need to convince our clients that it actually makes sense for them to install sprinklers or to put their high-value equipment higher up because they're in a floodplain and those kind of things. So we also like to use AR and VR, so we can have our clients actually put on a headset, and then we can show them, well, this is what it looks like if you have a flood. This is what it looks like when your building is on fire, and to have that experience really helps as a selling tool for us to convince them to put in, to take the proper measures. And finally, like I said, since we have the big research campus, it's very hard to bring everybody in to show them what a big fire looks like. So one thing that we've been talking about is having a remote, what we call a remote research campus experience, where we have a large side-by-side fire test, and then we can have the headset again in operations all over the world, have them wear the headset, and then they can experience almost as if they are there what it's like if there's a large fire in the facility. So yeah, a lot of useful tools there for us.
All right, so I have another question for you that just came up. So you said you're operating on a global level. I think you were talking about India and all those other countries earlier. What are kind of the challenges you experience with the technology, talking about this large scale?
So I think some of the challenges, I mean, there's a multitude of challenges. We did a pilot in Nigeria, and we just had to, there was some, people were a little bit nervous if the unit was actually going to get there, if we send it out there. And then we're sending it, another challenge is that we are, and this is a little bit different from what I heard from some of the other people, we actually go to clients' facilities, so we are actually at someone else's facilities. I mean, they're our clients, they're our owners, since we're a mutual company, but it's their facility. So if we take on wearables, it's not just internal anymore. We're actually at other people's place. So I heard it mentioned before about, what is it perceived like by others when you wear a head-mounted device, and how does that come across? So we really have to rely heavily on a very strong relationship with a client, that they're going to be willing that you come into their facility wearing these glasses, and that you actually add value. I mean, you're actually going to be able to help them prevent a loss, right? So that's our value proposition. So, and that works for a certain percentage of our clients, and some clients are on the fence, or there's some chemical operations where it's simply not possible. We heard that before as well. We have a huge chemical operation. So there's also some facilities where it's just, from a hazard perspective, where you can do it. So those are some challenges as well. So we just try to implement it where we can, and just see how it works for now.
Okay, so I heard one challenge is kind of like the privacy of the companies. They're scared that, tape or take pictures of information they don't want to go out there because it's internal. Yeah,
you go to Willy Wonka's factory, and they don't want you to wear they don't want you to show how the chocolate is made, right? So.
Okay, so talking about a privacy thing a little bit, I know that we talk to different postal services in Europe with our solution, and people are always concerned with the privacy. So what is your experience with that, talking about a postman coming up to your door with the glasses?
Sure, so it's definitely a balancing act, because people think of their regular carrier knowing that they want their packages on their back stoop. Well, that person isn't your regular carrier. They just might have made an agreement with you, and they might come to your house a couple times a week, but you really don't have a regular carrier. The Postal Service is set up now so that multiple carriers do the same route. That institutional knowledge, though, is an expectation of communities that it's passed from carrier to carrier. The way they do that right now is a physical book. It's called the Red Book, and it has details about every route. but that is not an efficient way to take care of 150 million delivery points each day. So integrating that type of technology is definitely a balancing act. The Postal Service has been very forthcoming that all of your mail is already scanned, all of the information is already scanned. There's no one reading your mail and seeing where it goes to. It's a machine that does it, it's an optical reader. So there's already so much technology baked into it. It's just about telling the public why we're using it.
Right, so it's kind of like sharing the knowledge and spreading it. Okay, so Rock, I know you are using AR, wanted to use it in stores for getting new goods in, and there's a touch point with private people as well. So what is your thought on that?
So I think, on the floor is an interesting piece because with our customers, one of the things that they are doing is they're just not on the floor to be there. They're normally doing a job. Sometimes that job requires them to be looking at a device. And so if we can have their hands free and their head up, are they more engaged with you? How do we help train them in the way to know when to respond to you and when not to? Because you don't always want us to bombard you when you're in a store. And so there's some of that personal development. But because our associates are on the floor all the time, the barrier on that is lower from a privacy of customer wondering why the associate's on the floor, because most of the time they're stocking a shelf, you see what they're doing. It's actually the opposite, and Jay and the team at Google touched on a little bit. It's how do we make them feel when they're on the floor? Because they're interacting with hundreds and thousands of people. Do they feel confident and do they feel like they should be there? And that's some of why we have the academy. It's with that format, 30% is in the classroom, 70% is on the sales floor. So we're engaging you and teaching you in the moment in there, and that's why the VR was so important as well.
Great, so this could be kind of like the first stage of introducing the technology to the privacy of everybody. Okay, so the next question is kind of like an open question for all of you. Just sharing the aha moments, like positive things, negative things, just with all the use cases you guys have. So Mitch, why don't you start?
Yeah, totally. So I would say my aha moment was when we were designing, we were going through this project of let's understand VR. Is it the right tool to design and plan some of our operations? It expanded beyond just a kit, and I use it just about every week now from a plant layout perspective. So if you think about it, you have an operation, you're almost constantly thinking about how do I optimize that? And one of the things that we do is we kind of have these micro Kaizen activities where we say, hey, what if we changed your workstation like this? The operator can actually put the headset on and say, my inbound goods are here, finished goods are going this way, my tools make sense right here, maybe move my consumables over here. You can actually have that whole dialogue using VR without spending a penny on any mechanical, electrical, or plumbing work that's done. So our biggest aha moment was that first use case and the technology that we established is able to be applied to other shop problems that we're constantly trying to solve.
Great.
For us, when you're talking in this space, let's be honest, it's cool, right? It's new tech, especially for all of us in the room who get exposed to it. But you think about an hourly associate level across 4,700 stores across the US, most of them don't have this tech at home, so there was that. But I'll tell you, the big aha for us was we knew the person wearing it would have that, oh wow, this is really cool. We underestimated the amount of impact on the room. So we actually measure the engagement, and in the academy actually get tested. So we actually were able to move those who did it in VR, not only wearing the glasses, but just sitting in the classroom, their test scores went up. And they were already good, and we still were able to raise that bar. We greatly undervalued the impact that those just participating, not actually in the unit, in the VR world, the level that they would be engaged. It was shocking the first time I sat in a classroom and the person in the headset couldn't talk fast enough because you were getting the dynamics of the room all pitching in and helping each other with whatever situation we were throwing in front of them.
So no negative stuff so far.
Oh, you're looking for negative stuff?
No, no.
Oh. Yeah, kind of to build on that, I think, and I've heard that before, it's sort of the sexy technology dilemma. So everybody, I mean, if it's drones or you have this technology, and now you start to look for problems to solve with it, and it's really the wrong way around, right? So there's a job to be done, there's a problem to be solved, and then, like we heard from the prior talk, you go through the toolkit, which is now constantly being enhanced with all these new technologies. So yes, there are new opportunities, but it really starts with the problem. And that's more an aha moment, because I kind of fell into that trap. I was like, oh, let's just go online and see these cool little things and just try to convince my boss to get it, and not really making a business case for it. So I think it's important that if you do use a new technology, that it's part of some sort of plan. And see if you can, and try to structure it as much as you can, and really go after the problem that you're trying to solve.
Great. So it's your turn.
I finally get to talk.
Yeah, you can. I'm sorry I didn't get to you yet, but I have more questions for you.
I'm playing. Just to piggyback on Job's observation, it really is the truth is that when the use cases come from the field, when they come from the grassroots, they're already validated use cases. And it doesn't matter how much research you put into the upfront to validate your use case. If there isn't a need for it on the field, it's going to be extremely difficult to succeed. And so that's not to discount, research efforts that go into validating use cases. But unless you get your user group to a point where they're failing or not succeeding on a level that they could be with this technology, then you're not creating a demand out in the field, and so you can give them the best solution to a problem that they're not currently experiencing, and it's not going to work. I think the biggest aha moment for us across the board has been that these devices, these technologies, all of these visualization technologies are one part of an ecosystem. I think the gentleman from Google, his last slide was the most impactful to me, because it wasn't the thank you slide, it was the one right before the thank you slide. It was the one where he was showing how cloud computing was an integral part of this ecosystem. Because when these devices go mobile, when they go full mobile, and a lot of them already are, but a lot of the ones that we use in our industry for visualizing geometry and architecture, they're still tethered. And the ones that aren't have very limited computing power. And so we're going to get to a point where these devices get smaller and smaller, and they're going to be challenged for computing power more and more. And they're going to rely on off-site computing power to do their job really well. And they're going to rely on being connected to the environment in which they are active to do their job really well. I mean, we're working on this concept of spatial awareness, to where the environment that you're in is contributing to your productivity mode. It's contributing to the job, the work that you're trying to do. And that's really the aha moment. It's not just about the way you're visualizing it. It's about what you're visualizing, how it's being captured, how the environment is contributing to how it's being captured, how it's enabling you. It's all of these things together that are really the future of what these technologies represent. Because one of the things that we do as a design firm, as an architecture firm, is that we're not working in one industry. We're not working, under one use case. We're working in almost every use case, almost every industry. We don't get into mining, right? There are not a lot of architecture in mining. But when you think about everything from retail to multifamily living to hospitals, education, tall buildings, all of the consulting practices, all of the workplace practices, each one of them is a curated opportunity for capturing data, for leveraging data. And so we're looking at the way that, right now, we look at the way that we can influence the way that these devices are being developed. That's important. But eventually, these devices are going to influence the places that we design, because of the way that they're going to fundamentally change how we consume information. So that is our big aha moment, and that is the roadmap to the future of our industry.
Okay, I think a lot of you just made as well, because yeah, Ellen just took it to a whole nother level. But Kelly, please share your moments
follow
as
up.
well.
Something that was really an aha moment for us is we were looking at the changing workforce of the Postal Service, that we're moving to more part-time, and that those part-time have an extremely high turnover rate. And we were saying, all right, where does that hurt the Postal Service right now? And the thing that we were hearing from postmasters and station managers in the field is that instead of worrying about moving the mail, they had to instead worry about constantly coming back and training their employees. And employees didn't know where to go. They weren't completely integrated into the postal system yet, which made the employees frustrated and management frustrated. Looking at the ways that we could train employees using these technologies has been really just amazing and mind-boggling how people are using them. And like it was said earlier, yeah, on the plant floor they might be useful, but in the training and taking away 50% of training time, I mean, that would change the Postal Service as we know it.
All right, so before we talk to Ellen a little bit more about this crazy future, let's talk about money first, because I know everybody is always talking about money, return of investments, and we all know the technology isn't the cheapest. So Mitch, you said you were using VR for creating the perfect facility before building it, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
So what is your thought on the money you spend for the technology and what it gives you in return in savings?
Yeah, I think it depends on the use case, and there's a lot to that question. From an ROI perspective, what our initial approach with using VR was what GE calls FastWorks, and the idea is instead of having this long, drawn-out project where you have a ton of cash tied up, you got a bunch of people, you typically have toll gates, we wanted to get to what is called a MVP, so a minimum viable product. And so our first stab at it was actually scripting everything in Unity, so if you're familiar with Unity, and we created this simulation where anybody could put the headset on and here's a bunch of parts in front of you, and I want it to look like this, and that's exactly what we did. And from a cost perspective, Unity's free. It was just basically people's time. But I can't do that with every single use case. I can't afford having a team script a bunch of different things, whether it's a layout change or it's something that's related to a kit. And so we went out looking for an app or a tool that's more realistic, because that's probably what's going to get adopted in your shop. You know, the closer you get to it's just a touch of a button, the easier it is for people to embrace that. And so we actually went out and we found, we did not find one of the great things about GE is we have access to what's called the GRC, which is our Global Research Center, and these are teams that are constantly looking for new technologies to introduce to multiple plants. And so we were able to connect with them and leverage their network, and we found, I strongly recommend it, Middle VR's Improve. It's basically an app that allows you to just download it to a machine. You can connect to different machines. You can inject just about any type of 3D model that you want, and there's functionalities that allow you to interact with models, measure models. There is a ergonomic assessment within the tools. So like kind of how I talked about, I want to know from a safety perspective, is this workstation too low for you or is it too high for you? It'll tell you that. But from a cost perspective, it's as simple as purchasing an app and then the time of using that. That's kind of what we approach it from. I try to avoid the long, drawn-out 6 to 12-month projects that require an integration and additional teams, because typically those are more prone to delay or risk, you know.
All right, great, thank you. So Kelly, the Postal Service has a lot of employees. You talked about those many touch points and this crazy number of mailings. How do you justify, for example, a glass that's about 1,000, 2,000 euros, or dollars, I'm sorry, not in Germany.
The Postal Service is very open to pilots. It's been using pilots for a lot of different technologies. It just has to be a strong enough use case and a strong enough sort of why we need it to work and how it will help. The big thing for our pilots, and they're all over the country, they're going on all the time, just because you don't hear about them doesn't mean they aren't happening, is that the Postal Service wants to ensure that they are getting that ROI, and the measurable efficiency is really important. So when we go into it, we're looking at, can this be measured? Is this just a feel good, I feel like I'm doing better work, or is it an actually, I'm doing better work?
Okay, great. So Ellen, now it's your time.
No, I was actually going to piggyback on these things. I mean, I've been at my firm for 10 years, and I've been working in different iterations of VR and AR since the early 90s. And one of the things that I've been fortunate to have experienced was this transition from the physical requirements of communicating the design product to like leveraging these virtual tools. I mean, I've been part of projects where we have had to build entire retail stores out of foam core in order for decisions to be made. How far are tables away from each other, where are products assorted? And those foam core models were all the way down to the product. So if you can imagine, boxes of things made of foam core set up on tables just to gain understanding of the physical requirements of that, right? So think about the time that went into creating the model, the time that went into producing that foam core model, and then the amount of resources that were spent. All of that is time and money, right? And now with VR, we've been able to reduce that decision making into a fraction, right? And with AR, starting to look at those things in real context. So instead of doing them in a foam core place, hey, put the asset, put the change, put the modification in the real environment. Like we're using AR to put the design product in the in-progress construction site and be able to look around and go, okay, these things are in the right places. They installed that in the wrong place. Now we're going to have a conflict there. We need to resolve that conflict before the crew comes in the morning. Being able to do that is an incredible savings in time and effort. And so from that standpoint, I mean, AR is like just an incredible advantage, an incredible improvement in our work process.
I see that. Okay. So you also told me you're not only using the technology to visualize your buildings, the commercial buildings, but also really using the technology and all the connection to design the buildings of the future.
Yeah, so, it's really back to that conversation about what is the workplace or what is the productivity place of tomorrow going to be? And productivity you can contextualize in a lot of different ways. All it means is that you're achieving something. You're achieving something in a positive direction because you can be productive at being entertained, right? You can go somewhere and you can be successful in that manner. And so looking at the way that these technologies, going back to that, how these devices are going to influence the places that we design more importantly than, or as importantly than how these technologies are helping us design those places. Because if you can think of a place, like let's say it was your workplace, and instead of you having to go to a certain place in your workspace, your desk, to get access to the things that are yours, your monitors. Imagine you have a workplace without monitors now, and there's companies that are pursuing this as a core part of their business. So if you no longer need monitors, what does your desk look like? I mean, the size and placement of your desk is based on a lot of physical needs. The size of the devices, proximity to network, all these things. Your phone's there, but what if all of a sudden those things are gone? What is your workplace going to look like? How is it going to transform? How is it going to change the way that you work? I mean, the reality is that right now, we leave our homes more from a need of engagement and entertainment than we do from a productivity need, because we can achieve everything that we do at work from home these days. There's nothing keeping us from doing that. We can do all of our shopping across the board. I bought a car online, I never test drove it. You can do everything from home. So the reason that you're leaving is to engage, right? And so how do we heighten the way that people are engaging the environments that they're interacting with? How is that going to change the places that we're designing? That's what we're looking at. That's why, I mean, from a hardware standpoint, we approach everything as platform agnostic, because we need to have conversations with everybody and understand the way everybody's thinking across the board. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Meta or ODG or Picavi. You know, we need to understand the way that they're approaching the technology, the way that they're thinking, so that we have those insights in the way that we think about the environments that we're designing for the things that support their work modalities. We can design those to take into account all of those things. And so for us, it's, you know, it's about leveraging this broad spectrum of work modalities, of practice areas, as we call them. Taking those and evaluating them against not where the technology is now, but where we see it going in the future, and intersecting that with the way that people in the industry are approaching the opportunities currently. Because we can't, it's a funny thing that you can't look forward without looking back, but being present in the now is just as important as looking back. You got to have the place to start, you have to have a place to react in time, and you have to have a direction. And that direction that you're moving in needs to have the opportunity to pivot, and that's where the here and now, you know, takes its effect. Because if you look at the way that people are developing devices right now, they're doing it use case based, right? We're addressing specific market segments, and that's great and that's fine. But eventually, all of these things are going to converge. They're going to become one thing, right? The VR device and the AR device are going to be the same thing. I mean, we're already seeing them, right? And one device or one device typology, just like the PC, is going to do some form of everything. And you'll get more specialized devices. They're going to be required. But if we're ever going to get to the place, and I believe that we are going to get to the place, where these devices are just kind of as common as wristwatches were for a while, that we're going to need to be part of all of the development conversations. And that's what we're focused on for the future.
Yes, that's a lot. Very philosophical. All right, so I have one more question. You were talking about keeping people engaged, you know. I think a lot of people work from home sometimes, but at some point we miss our colleagues, so we just go to the office again. Kelly, what do you think where the human being will be in the future, talking about your pilots and the robots, automation and all that stuff?
Sure, so we started a pilot in Pittsburgh with robotics in our facilities. And at first there was a lot of pushback. People didn't want their jobs replaced. They just saw it as a distraction. The robots are pretty slow because they need to make sure they don't run into anything. They're like, these are terrible. Then a couple weeks passed of them using them. And they were like, oh my gosh. Now when the robots are down, they're all complaining. They've named them. And they're like, well, Jim is down. Like, what are we gonna do? We have to do all this stuff that Jim does. And it's really interesting to see the switch and to see the buy-in. And even if it's saving them incremental amount of time, that's on a scale, that could be a lot of money for the Postal Service. And it's really about communicating to the employee, and we've talked about this a lot, that they're not going away, but their job is going to be better spent. Their time is going to be better spent. They're going to be making more of an impact.
So it's more a support system than a replacement.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you guys for answering my questions. I know I asked you more than I planned to. Sorry about that. But now we're going to open up. We have about 9 minutes, so we're going to open up to the audience. We heard a lot of stuff, so just feel free to ask any of us anything. Any questions? Right there?
It's coming.
So on? Okay, great. My name is Wayne Maiori with FinFrog. We design, manufacture, and construct precast concrete structures. So this is going to go to Alan mainly, I think. We've been trying to use the HoloLens for a while, trying to get it to be at a point where we can actually lay out forms to manufacture things, and we're running into some scaling issues and some precision issues. Have you come across that and found any good solutions behind that?
We have. It's a challenge right now because the reality is when we're talking about geometry and when we're talking about persistence in space, all of the devices are still challenged, right? They're on their way, but they're not there now. So we're experiencing the same thing, short answer. But we know that there is solutions coming very soon, right?
We feel it's a gross placement device, not a fine placement device.
It's correct. I mean, there's a discrepancy of a few millimeters per foot.
The gentleman asked what kind of precision are we getting. It depends on the scale. It's like a sliding issue. So at 65 feet, we could be off 1/4 of an inch. At 10 feet, we could be off 1/16 of an inch. So, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Alexis McGuffin with Lend-Lease Construction. This is for Alan as well. Could you speak to some of the successes that you've had in communicating very, very early design to investors or end users who can't even read sections or plans?
Well, that's been, and I think that's to VR, and that's part of the customer service thing. It's part of the engineering, manufacturing thing. It's a flat platform of understanding, right? If people are seeing objects, are experiencing your proposals spatially, right? They're understanding them in the same way that they understand the world around them. You're here, I'm here, we're all here, right? And if there's something here with us, we understand it in that manner. We've seen from an investor standpoint, we've seen from a developer standpoint, a huge move towards VR as a marketing platform. Because if you can put someone in a place, right, they understand that place the same way they understand the world, and they have a better chance at having that mutual understanding. I mean, really early in VR a few years ago, when we were having problems with a design proposal, it was this really intricate staircase that wrapped around a circular room, and we went through 5 or 6 weeks of back and forth with renderings and with sketches, and we flew a VR device out to the client, and they put it on, and within 3 seconds, they said, "Oh, I got it. This is approved. I don't want to do anything other than this anymore," right? And so it's the same thing with AR and VR. It's this flat platform of understanding. Investors, it gives them an insane amount of security in what it is that they're pursuing. And I talk to a lot of investors also from the standpoint of, from the VC standpoint in terms of like, is this technology viable? What are the problems with this particular device? Those types of things. And I think I think everybody that I've talked to sees the value. Everybody I talk to sees where the opportunity is, and it's becoming a more and more important part of our business. Again, we're still challenged in the sense that you still have to, unfortunately, get people to be challenged or to fail for them to wholeheartedly engage something. We're in the process of like those failures, influencing people implementing these solutions, but hopefully people will start to learn from other people's failures. People won't change their behaviors unless they can't be successful with the way they've regularly been doing things. And that's where we're at right now.
There's one right here.
Art Trevathan from Velocity. We're in the construction safety and compliance world. Now, actually, this is for Yacht. What you were talking about as far as using the augmented reality and such was more in the marketing and sales platform. As the insurance industry goes on, how do you see the integration of the massive data collection going into the underwriting effort and therefore providing the rates and providing a discount and other things for your clientele?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think and InsurTech in general is very much focused on having plugging in IoT devices. A lot of that is happening on personal lines, car insurance, and so forth, health insurance. One thing that I can tell is like I was looking at some of our internal presentation the other day. We paid multiple $1 billion in the past 10 years just on leaking liquids, which 95% is water. Friday afternoon, a valve pops, and you come in Monday, and you're stepping into a foot of water. So I think there's some low-hanging fruits there. Another one is there's hot work going on in the building, and they shut off a fire valve, and no one knows that fire valve is shut for half a year, and then there's a fire somewhere, and all of a sudden what we think was a perfectly containable fire now burns down the whole building, right? So why don't we know that valve is open? It seems such an easy thing. So I think there's really some low-hanging fruits there for us. I think since we insure mostly larger clients, multi-million dollars in premium, it's going to be very much a per case basis, right? So, but I think we just work with the easy ones first, and then get ourselves into the ecosystem that I think Alan was talking about, and then work our way and integrate more and more sensors into what we do, and work our way up from there.
Yeah, because it is all about data. I mean, in the end, yes, you have the visualization and the presentation that human beings can understand.
Yeah.
But then providing it in a layer that the computers and the processors can understand.
Yeah, and data on itself is not that valuable. You still need to train. You need to have, in the machine learning process, you need to have, some people think that you just plug in a sensor and there's this cognitive Watson device that's just going to solve every problem for you, but there's quite a bit of hand-holding and training and validation that needs to happen for it to work, right? So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The AI thing is a huge part of it,
Yeah.
All right, so I think we got time for one more quick question, if there is one right up here. Perfect.
This one, I guess, goes to Mitch. My name is Dennis Adamowitz. I work for a company called Parker Hannifin. They make like pumps and stuff that goes inside. Okay. Since we're collaborating more, what kind of support or standards do you look for when you're working with suppliers to build your transportation systems?
So right now, a lot of it's internal. And so in terms of suppliers and support, are you're talking more like specific software or? Okay, yeah, absolutely. So my take on this is I try to go find developers that are in their alpha or their beta, because I can drive that dialogue of what their tool is going to be. And that's exactly what happened with our VR tool. Is they were in their alpha, they're trying to figure out what does this need to be, and we said I needed to do these 10 things, and they went out and did that, and it was a huge value add to our whole team and our whole plant. So.
All right. Thank you. So if you have any more questions, you can find me at our booth, and I think you guys are here today as well. So thank you very much for joining in. Thank you for answering all the questions. It was a pleasure.
Let's thank the panel.